The premiere of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was on September 23, 1969. It starred Paul Newman and Robert Redford, and the movie impressed critics and eventually claimed box office glory and 4 Oscars. The movie is the story of 2 of the most likable outlaws in Western history. It's completely researched in facts and has a real contemporary feel and spirit to it. Both of the main characters are still young, yet they're really over the hill, and they're terribly threatened by the dirty, mechanized resources of lawmen and the railroads. The film is directed by George Roy Hill, and it was written by William Goldman. It's loosely based on fact, but Hollywood does take quite a few liberties with the picture. The story of Butch Cassidy was first introduced to the screenwriter in the late 1950s, and he continued to research this for about 8 years before he decided to write the screenplay. Once he completed the screenplay, he sent it out to various studios, and there was only one that wanted to buy it. You see, Westerns were all about confrontation, and this film was not. These outlaws ran. And that was the big emphasis in this film, is the witty dialogue between these two as they outrun the lawmen. All the various studios knew was that John Wayne didn't run. This was a totally different type of Western. Jack Lemmon was offered the role of Sundance because his production company had filmed and done Cool Hand Luke, starring Paul Newman. Lemmon completely turned the role down because he just didn't like riding horses that much and just didn't feel like doing it. Steve Mcqueen and Warren Beatty were also considered for the role of Sundance, and they both turned it down. Beatty said that he didn't want to do it because he felt that the role was too similar to Bonnie and Clyde. Steve Mcqueen eventually backed out from doing the film because he just kept butting heads with Paul Newman. On the very first day of filming, involving the train robbery scenes, Catherine Ross came to the set to watch. There were 5 cameras, and they only had 4 operators. So the lead cinematographer, Conrad Hall, put her on one of the extra cameras. He showed her how to operate it, and she felt completely at home on the camera. In comes the director, George Hill, and he was absolutely furious about this. But he didn't say anything during the day. But at the end of the filming of these scenes, he banned Catherine Ross from being on the set except when she was working. Now, she loved doing the second unit stuff that was filmed by a totally different director. The main thing being the silent scenes that were done riding the bicycle. She loved those the best, because she felt like she was out from under the reins of the director. She stated many times that any day away from George Hill was a good one. Now, it's said that Lula Parker Bedinson, the sister of the real Butch Cassidy, often visited the set. Her presence was really welcomed by all of the cast and crew. During lulls in the shooting, she would tell great stories about her famous brother's escapades. And she was also kind of amazed at how accurate the script was, and also how well Paul Newman portrayed him. Before they released the film, the studio had found out about her visits to the set, and they tried to convince her to endorse the movie in a series of ads to be shown in theaters across the country. She stated that she would gladly do this, but she wanted to see the finished film first to make sure that she truly understood what was behind it. The studio refused to give in, saying that allowing her to see the film before its release would harm its reputation. At that time, Robert Redford stepped in with a suggestion and told the studio to pay her a small fee and maybe she would endorse the movie. That's what ended up happening, and everybody was happy. Now, in order to get the great shot of the super posse when the horses are jumping out of the train, the door on the opposite side of the train was left open, and a ramp was placed there out of view of the camera and that side of the train. In real life, the horses would not have had enough room in the train car to make such a dramatic leap out of the train. All of the scenes that were supposedly in Bolivia were filmed in Mexico, which was a very tough time for most of the cast and crew and the director, because all of them came down with Montezuma's Revenge, which is severe diarrhea caused by drinking Mexico's notoriously polluted water. The only people that were spared this experience were Robert Redford, Paul Newman, and Catherine Ross, because they had just refused to drink any water that was catered on the set, and they stuck to drinking soda or alcohol for the duration of the shoot. Now, there's some debate on actually what Etta Place's profession was, but William Goldman decided to make her a teacher because he had seen a photograph of her in real life and decided that she was just too pretty to be a prostitute. Most of the women that chose that profession in the Old West had more of a haggard, unhealthy look in the photos that you see of them. Now, it's most common when talking about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid's gang that they're referred to as the Wild Bunch. But the problem with that in this film was that Sam Peckinpah had a film going on called The Wild Bunch, and it had been released a few months earlier. They changed the name of the gang to the Hole in the Wall Gang to avoid confusion with Peckinpah's film. The song Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, done by B.J. Thomas, was originally thought by Robert Redford to be a terrible pairing for this bicycle scene that it was used in. Who would have known this went on to become one of the most iconic scenes in the film? This is one of the times where Paul Newman did his own stunts. He chose to ride the bicycle in these scenes because there were some fairly close-up shots. And the other reason was that his stuntman was having trouble staying on the bike. The only scene that he didn't shoot was the one where Butch crashes backwards into the fence. And this stunt was performed by the cinematographer Conrad L. Hall. It's kind of funny that Paul Newman did these stunts on the bicycle, but he got really irritated at Robert Redford for wanting to do all of his own stunts. He was especially mad for Redford wanting to do the stunt where he jumps on the roof of the train and runs along the top of the cars as the train is moving. Newman was just furious about this. He told him that he didn't want him to do all these heroic things around here because he just didn't want to lose his co-star and completely screw up the movie. The rest of the time, Paul Newman and Robert Redford got along great. They loved making this film. And both of them have commented on how much fun they had in Mexico during the shoot. They drank a lot of beer while they were filming. Paul Newman had a fun time kidding Robert Redford about him being tardy to the set, and he suggested that they change the name of the film to Waiting for Lefty. This is because Redford is left-handed. The movie was filmed roughly at the same time as Hello, Dolly, and it was done on a soundstage that was right next door to it. The director believed that the studio would allow him to film the New York scenes on the Dolly set, because the film's daily shooting schedules were totally different. After production had started on the film, the studio informed him that they wanted to keep it totally separate, that they wanted to keep the sets on Dolly a complete secret, and they refused to give him permission to film there. To work around this problem, he had Robert Redford, Paul Newman, and Catherine Ross simply pose on the sets, and they took pictures and photographs of them. He then inserted the images of the three stars into a series of 300 actual period photos and spliced the different sets together to form the New York City montage. Now, one of the most iconic scenes from the movie is the river jump scene. Now, it's pretty amazing that all this was filmed at Century Ranch near Malibu. This is the same area that they filmed MASH, and there's been a whole lot of other films filmed in this location. Paul Newman and Robert Redford stuntmen jump off a construction crane by the Century Lake. The crane was obscured by a matte painting of the cliffs. Newman and Redford start their jump in Colorado, but they only land on a mattress in that scene. With the magic of Hollywood and some creative editing, this well-remembered scene is a fingerprint of the film. Now, the only major conflict between Paul Newman and the director occurred over what became known as the Bledsoe Scene, which was a break in the extended posse chase when Butch and Sundance go to visit the old sheriff, hoping to get him to help them enlist to fight in the Spanish-American War. Newman felt that the scene should come at the end of the chase and be the motivation for their flight to South America. Hill completely disagreed strongly with him. Every day, Newman came on the set with a new set of fresh arguments on why it should be done his way. But as you know, the scene ended up with Hill winning the argument. I have to agree with Paul Newman on this one because it seems somewhat out of place to me in The Pursuit. This film grossed $82,000 in its opening week from 2 theaters in New York City. The following week, it expanded and became the #1 film in the U.S. and Canada for 2 weeks running. It had a final gross of over $100 million, and it was the top-grossing film that was released in 1969. Take a look back at this classic. You can watch it for free on IMDb. After watching it again, you'll understand why it was such a popular success in 1969. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.